Okay, this is super exciting. I'm at an event that Nacon are holding in France. They flown me out here. I've been trying a load of different games, including Rennsport. I haven't driven for a while. I'm here with Kim from Rennsport, and I just want to get a state of the union with Rensport, kind of where we are. I've actually got a load of questions that you guys have been putting in the comments. But firstly, where are we right now with Rensport? Because it came out on Epic, it's now out on Steam. We're still kind of in that early stage. Would you say, is it ready for people to jump into, or is it still a little bit rough around the edges? Kind of where are we with Rensport right
now? Yeah, so right now, Rensport is available on Epic and Steam in early access, which means that you can drive a lot of our base content, GT3 cars, LMDH cars, along a lot of tracks, actually. Normal, European GT3 race tracks. Recently, we announced it to be a console release. So right now, we're working very hard on doing all the optimization, making it ready for launch.
Yeah.
That's going to happen later this year. But still, right now, you can jump in and drive for free on Epic and Steam.
Yeah. So launching an early access is, a lot of sims are doing it now. And part of the reason we get from developers and publishers is to get that feedback from players. Has there been any feedback that kind of you've got from players that has already kind of been addressed in the game, that you've seen players saying, oh, we would like this, and then you deliver it and you get the feedback?
Absolutely. So one of the big things is our physics in general. We take every piece of feedback that we get from the community and also the esports driver in our R1 competition, take it very close to heart and try to make cars based on what people want to drive. So the community has been heavily influencing the way that the cars feel in the game in general.
That's very interesting, because some people might say there's only one way a car should drive. That is how it drives in real life, and there's one objectiveness to it. However, there's another view, and we see this in hardware as well, like we want to make it enjoyable for the players. Does Rensport kind of have a position there? Is there, because some people are like, no, there's only one way it should drive, and if it drives really badly, well, that's real life, but that might not be fun to race.
Right.
Is Rensport there, or is Rensport kind of, we want to make it accessible, we want you to have fun driving it?
So we make all the cars based on real world data that we get from the car manufacturer.
Okay.
So we input that as the baseline. So this car feels the way that the manufacturer intended it to feel. The rest of that comes from car setup. You change the front wing, you change the camber of the tires, and then you can bring characteristics out of that car based on that. So that's what we get in the community stuff with. Like, how do you believe that this car performs at its best? And then we try to make the best version out of that car that we can, sticking with the realistic data that we get from the car manufacturer.
So you always have that realistic data, but then you're adjusting the setup. Like default setups that you change in the game?
Exactly.
Okay, because I see a lot of setup shops and people paying for setups, and I have mixed feelings about it, because a lot of us, we buy the game, we want to race, and we don't want to feel like, oh, there's a better setup. So it's good for me to hear that actually there's a thought going into the setup in the game that's quite helpful.
Yeah, so right now in early access, everything is a fixed setup based on that community feedback.
Okay.
Once we go into launch, we're going to open up the setup system, and you can tinker with it yourself, and we can also set presets based on the community feedback. So we can have like a racy option or a more grippy option.
Okay. But right now you don't need to worry about the setup. Okay, so you just jump in and drive. Okay, that's something that I'd forgotten. Something that the community have asked me is about daily races in VR. VR users participating in daily races. Obviously, Rensport has virtual reality. I've tried it. Is there some kind of is there some way that we can bring VR to the daily races, or is that technically not possible because of, I guess, VR is more straining on the PC?
So the goal is to bring VR to every part of the racing, online contest, single player, whatever. Right now, we had to take a step back in the VR development to get everything ready for consoles.
Okay, got it.
But we will re-enable that development and put more effort into it after launch.
Okay.
And then you're going to be able to drive everything.
So is VR still an important part for Rensport?
Absolutely.
Okay, fine. Do you get a lot of feedback from VR drivers? Because obviously people in VR are using different headsets. And do you know if people really want the ability to run higher frame rates or have higher resolution? Do you have an idea of what they prefer? Or?
This is the reason why we brought it out during early access, because we wanted to get that initial batch of feedback. Like, what do you expect this experience to be when you drive it? So we collected all of that. I don't have all the data only, obviously, but so we have loads of data to pull from, what people want, how we worked on different kinds of headsets. When we start to craft it back now again, we have all of that data available to us.
Okay, so if you've got any questions as well, put them in these comments and I'll put them to Kim after. Let's talk about player feedback again, like cars, tracks. What kind of cars do people want? Let me just also give some more context. There are so many sims where people can drive GT3 cars. Rensport has a lot of a GT3 focus, especially on the esports side. Do you see yourself as a GT3 game, or a player saying, I want to drive hypercars, I want to drive the Porsche, R1 or with the electric car? What are people saying?
So I think we in the eyes of the public, we started out as a GT3 game, and that's what we saw this also because we launched the ESL R1 competition on the GT3 cars. Since then, we've launched several new classes with the LMDH cars. We have an electric vehicle in there. We have some top cars also. And I'm not supposed to say this, but so after release now, we're also looking at some vintage cars.
Oh, okay.
So we want to have as many different possible vehicles available to all types of drivers, so you can enjoy whatever car that you want. Like, do you like classic DTMs, for example? There might be some of that. Do you like classic cars that used to run on Le Mans, for example?
Yeah. So, do you think it will be unfair for people to say, "Oh, Rennsport's a GT3 game"? Actually, it's more than that.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, it's interesting because the perception still might be it's a GT3 game as these cars come.
Yeah, and it's the class that has the most cars in it
Yeah.
still. So it's fair, I guess,
Yeah.
but we want to be more than that.
Yeah.
The goal is to be more than that.
I think GT3 racing is really interesting because GT3 has been super successful in real life racing. Like, it's been a massive success for manufacturers and people getting involved. A lot of people on, say, Gran Turismo, they're screaming for new GT3 cars, which you get in something like Rennsport. But on the other hand, because it's so popular, there's so many places to drive it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, in a way, it's a nice one to have. Something I do want to get some clarity on is the e-VINs, or the way that you purchase cars. So as I understand it, you can kind of purchase a car and you actually kind of own the car. And I can see the appeal there of like, that's my car and I'm going to stick with that car. It's a bit similar to, in a way, what you do in iRacing, where you have to pay for a car and then, but this has some extra elements. Where are we now with like the e-VINs, and where are we? So I think this has changed a little bit over time, or I don't really understand where we are now. So what's
Sure. So the main vision for the e-VIN is still the same as it's ever been. We want a car to have, you have ownership over your car, and we want that car to build your race history.
Okay.
At the moment, what that means in early access is that the car tracks your kilometers driven, basically. The goal here, or the vision, is that it also tracks like what kind of contest you entered, what kind of race wins you have, what kind
You
of...
say contests like overtakes, battles, or just
races.
races?
Okay. Races, championships, tournaments, whatever. Tracks that data, counts your wins, whatever, and then you build sort of like a legacy of your own car. So that's the main mission. Now, since we're releasing on consoles simultaneously as PC, we're also looking at how does the monetization model we have now factor into the console release. So there will be some changes in that. Evens will still stay the same, no matter what. But so we're going to have more to talk about monetization-wise in a month or so.
I think it's super interesting because I think there's a lot of, especially in the more sim-case side, there's a lot of games that just throw cars at you, and it's not very rewarding.
Yeah.
And it kind of degrades or makes the cars less important when you get given an incredible like Ferrari or Porsche or whatever. On the other hand, with iRacing, people have this kind of like recall of I've got to buy every car.
Yeah.
But I think there is something that I think a lot of people can agree on, that when you choose a car and you have an affinity with it, you should try and drive that car a lot to really understand the car and understand the characteristics. Yeah. And even is one way of coming at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that's the prize. It's like, how do you connect people with the car like we have in real life?
Yeah. But what we know from sim racing is also that the most hardcore drivers are the ones that tend to stick to their class or what they know. So they drive a couple of the same vehicles over and over again, different tracks, different competitions, whatever. But they tend to stick loyal to whatever they like to drive. And they develop sort of like a skill level based on that class and stick with that. So that's why the building a legacy on a car is super important.
So is it, just to dive into that a little bit more, you're saying like someone could be like, oh, I'm really good in the Porsche 911, and here's my car that has all the stats. Because really, people aren't just GT3 drivers, you're saying.
Yeah.
They're like, I like driving the Ferrari, I like driving the Porsche.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Then you can then show it off in your garage, have other people look at it, and they can see your history on your car. Like, what did you do with that car? And you can see, like, in 2025, I won this competition. And then you preserve that legacy.
In a way, the cars, for that to work, the cars have to be exclusive. Because if you just have a million cars in your garage, not one is special. So in a way, it will reward the people who are like, this is my car and this is what I drive, and I'm really proud of my achievement. And then the competitive aspect comes into it. So
we're really excited about the system, and we think it can bring a lot of value, especially when we start to talk about more classic cars and more legacy cars. Otherwise, like, you start to build a car collection, so we can tap into some of the car culture aspects of racing as well, to bridge that gap between the car culture and the racing.
Like showing off your cars and stuff. Okay, not talking really about console, but just talking about pads and wheels. Obviously, later in the future, pad is going to be important. Are you seeing people on PC playing on pad? Are you kind of like, or is that a really small market?
Yeah, so in early access at least, we tend to see that that's the most hardcore dedicated players that tends to interact with an early access release.
Yes, yes.
So there's mostly steering wheels and pedals
Yeah.
right now. Obviously, gamepad is still important, both for PC and obviously console.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll keep tuning there. And in terms of the hardware, obviously supporting a load of hardware. Rensport is going to be published by Nacon. Nacon are making RevoSim coming to market. Is it going to be any kind of special stuff there, or is it just going to be one of many wheels that you can use?
It's going to be one of many wheels that are supported, but we're working together with the guys on the technical side to make sure we can develop like a baseline setup that is super good out of the box with the RevoSim.
Yeah.
Since we have that publishing relationship, it's really easy to get access to the information.
Yeah.
But we want to support fully as many steering wheels and pedal combinations as possible.
Yeah. And just finally, Kim, any words to people who are on iRacing, they're on Le Mans Ultimate, maybe they're still on ACC, any words why now they should jump into something like Rensport? What does Rensport give them?
I think all of those titles are great titles. I think if you enjoy racing, you can have fun on either one of those you pick. I think that if you try Rensport in the coming months, you're going to see that we are really trying to make something different from those experiences, but still sticking true to the hardcore sim racing aspects.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting to watch, definitely trying different stuff, and also the esports is very promising as well. So thank you so much for giving us a lowdown, Kim, the update, and I'm excited to see where Rensport goes next.
Thank you.